have a very honest conversation with yourself about what you are good at and what is happening in the marketplace. And then ask how those two things can come together. Because you could be great at something, but if there's no one to sell it to or produce it for, you don't have a business. But why aren't we also saying the other side, which is being your own job, being your own business? That's what will exist. And there's going to be other things that we create because of human ingenuity. So let's get into it. Let's not be afraid. Let's start making, creating, and building and thinking and imagining. But most people have been so well trained to do their job that they actually have been trained out of using their imagination. We also don't recognize very often that our aging is one of our greatest is one of our greatest innovations. That we've only been aging, like living past 100, for the last 150 years or so, right? So it's there. What's baked into us is this idea that all human beings become diminished as they get older. If you think you're going to be replaced, you're not going to be replaced because you're constantly innovating.
Yeah.
AI is a tool. I understand that there's a lot of fear, and I don't know enough about it to say, well, is AI going to be are they going to be sentient beings? As of right now, these are large operating systems that we can use to be assistants, to be tools, to be mediums of progress for our businesses.
What you just heard were a few moments from my episode with Che Marville, who didn't just reinvent her career after facing midlife employment rejection, but reimagined what it means to be a solopreneur in a world that tells you to play smaller. In this episode, we unpack how to leverage your diverse background when the world tells you to pick a lane, why traditional employment might be failing you in midlife, and how podcasting, done right, can become your most powerful lead engine. This is Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm Nikhil. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm your host, Nikhil Vaish, founder and CEO of Boost Solo. My next guest transformed decades of experience across politics, healthcare, and corporate leadership into a thriving media company after facing the reality of midlife employment rejection, showing us that our biggest setbacks can become our greatest comebacks. Che, welcome to the show.
Wow. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. It is my privilege and it is a pleasure to be on your platform. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I'm excited to have you on, and I'm going to dive into our conversation. So,
Awesome.
in our pre-call, you mentioned your career has been a dynamic, eclectic journey that you couldn't have planned, right? So when you were a social science researcher at the Ontario Science Centre, did you ever imagine the path would lead you to where you are today?
100% no. I and really I thought of myself as a researcher and writer, and that's really where I was, focused, and I was thinking of going to grad school, and my career just started to evolve in these really remarkable ways. And when I was a researcher, I got to meet some of the most incredibly interesting scientists and designers. I interviewed people like John Poliani and just there were so many, Ursula Franklin, who was a great scientist. I had the privilege of interviewing some incredible people and talking to people and working on First Nations reservations, doing research. And it really opened me up to a whole new world. And then I went into healthcare, and then I went into developing a children's museum, and then I went into politics for a little while. That's when I was really a little bit out of my mind. And along the way, I learned to be a meditation teacher. I've been practicing meditation since I was about 12. And I wanted to learn about how to relieve anxiety and stress. I was struggling with insomnia in my late 20s. And I found that mindfulness was transformative. I developed a program called Taking It to the Floor for one of the largest teaching hospitals in Canada called UHN, also known as Toronto General, Princess Margaret, and Toronto Western. And we had incredible results across multiple units of nurses where after 6 weeks of mindfulness and yoga, they felt a reduction in stress. And that was in 2008, I think, 2009. And that just opened me up to more work in healthcare. And then I transitioned and I built my own consulting business. And yeah, it's been a wild ride. I didn't really know that I was an entrepreneur until about 10 years ago.
Yeah, we're going to come back and talk on that. That is fascinating, though. I mean, clearly, because, you know, we talked about this a little bit. In our generation, we were told sort of pick a lane and stay in
Yes.
it, right? Clearly, you
Yes.
missed that memo, which is wonderful. Yeah.
Which was always the criticism of so many people to this day. There's so many people who have criticized me, friends and family, who've said, why can't you choose one thing? And it's not so much about jumping around because I was at the Science Center for over a decade. I worked in healthcare for a decade. Um, it's really about it evolving. And what's been so fantastic about it is that I really feel like this moment in time where there's all this massive chaotic change, it makes it makes sense to me.
Yeah, and I also love because I think that's, and I think we touched on this too a little bit, which is, you know, as kids, you imagine many different things, and there's
Yes,
nothing really stopping us from doing those things. You know, there may be a few professions where you really have to seriously study, like maybe medicine, and if you're building bridges,
neuroscience.
yeah, neuroscience, and if you're, you know, building bridges and buildings,
Yeah, architecture.
yeah, don't go learn that on YouTube. But for
Yeah.
pretty much everything else, it's like, you know, we have the aptitude, and if we have the willingness to learn and try, we have the ability to do that. And I think that's a wonderful thing about the age we live in, right? You are able to reinvent yourself today, in any in many ways as you want.
One of the reasons I say that I feel very comfortable in the time we are living is that I think a human life is one that isn't static. It's never the same. I think the challenge that so many people are having right now who are, over 40, over 50, over 60, is that they were conditioned to believe that you become one thing or and that one thing might uh, it might morph into other things, but you're still that one thing. And the reality is, as the world has expanded, as we have expanded intellectually as human beings, as we have become safer and stronger, as we have lived longer, what we are capable of also has expanded. And so this is a period of time for adaptability. I actually coach a lot of physicians and nurses, and many of them should be entrepreneurs. They should be doing other things. It doesn't mean that they are no longer healthcare practitioners or physicians. It means that that's part of their toolbox, and there's so much more for them than staying in one lane.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the beautiful things about that is also when you bring a wealth of diverse experiences, you also bring a very different perspective to every problem, right? So
Exactly.
I don't
Well,
think, go ahead.
diversity is complexity. That's one of the misconceptions about diversity, and is that it is about only about representation. And before there's ever representation, you have to have complexity of thinking, and the inclusion is a result of the complexity, because as you understand more about the object you are looking at, or the subject, or the product, or the service, or the challenge, or the problem, the more lenses you have that are different, the more guarantee there is that you are going to find a solution that you would not have come to by yourself or from your own informed experience. That's one of the great values of diversity. And unfortunately, there's a lot of debate about it right now, and it's kind of a bad word, but I just feel like most people don't understand it when they think it's a bad word.
No, beautifully put. And you're right. And I think part of it is also it was perhaps not positioned the way you just described it, right? There was a lot of checkboxness happening around it,
Yes.
and which I
Yes.
think sort of sullied the purpose of it. It wasn't so much, as you said, to include everybody. It was more to bring perspective and thinking, and like you said, a different lens, multiple lenses to the same problem.
Multiple lenses, and I think, we're also in this really wild, insane time where we don't value critical thinking and science and nuance. And the science is not about putting you in a box. Science is about scientific thinking should be about asking questions, re-asking the questions, finding out if the answers are true, then proving that the answers are not true. And just it's constant iterations. And I believe any philosophy you take into the workplace or into, a political ecosystem should have the same ethos. It should have the ethos of this is what we know now. And until we know something different, we'll behave this way. But we're going to continually ask different questions about the same matter. And of course, we're going to find different solutions.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we have a tendency where we jump to solutions now, right? Everyone wants quick
Yes.
fixes and quick answers. And I think that is, you're right. I think it was Einstein who said if I had an hour to spend on a problem, I'd spend 50 minutes on the problem and 10 minutes of the solution. So, yeah. And
We're quick to anger also right now. The culture is, I think, because we, I know this is going to maybe agitate a few people, but people who believe in free speech, and I am a free speech advocate as well, but because we invented, the collective we, the internet 30 or 40 years ago, and it had no regulations, and there was no actual real thinking about the psychological uh, examination and process that would happen to human beings using these technologies. And so we've emerged as these different people in this universe that is both physical and then sort of ethereal, and this universe that is all people giving their thoughts and judgments. And of course, it allows for you and I to have a conversation and have our own podcast, but then it also allows for the perpetuation of the algorithm of anger and and sort of difference and fighting. And so and there's nothing wrong with people being angry sometimes. What's happened, though, I think, is that the anger, the agitation, the rage has produced an effect on the overall global culture of thinking we don't need to be polite. We can say horrible things to one another, call it authentic. Right? And and there's no impact because maybe I'm faceless or maybe nobody ever sees my actual name. But I would never say that to you in front of your face. Right? And so we're all kind of, those of us who participate in social media, those of us who participate and use technology, which it's almost impossible not to, are all impacted by this disease of anger and rage and outrage and trying to hurt each other and see who can who can make the most provocative, hurtful statement. But the reality is that there's a ripple effect, chemically, the dopamine, what happens to us, the serotonin, the cortisol, the that hyping up internally of being agitated, of not trusting the world, of feeling like everybody's against you. We are really deep in the struggle of that right now.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it is the algorithms, I think, have been designed to sort of create that effect, right? And again, it's sort
Uh,
of like people are drawn to, and that's why someone, once told me, you're never going to see the headline about the grandmother who crossed the road safely, right? Because no,
no,
no, it's going to be the one, the bad outcome is what they're going to basically, because we sort of instinctively go towards that, right? I think part of it's
exactly.
also like, and you're right. And I don't think we've understood the impact it's going to have on our brains long term, right? And we're now starting to see the effects of that. So,
We're
yeah.
seeing the effects of it. I think there was a study about 6 years ago, and this was 6 years ago, it was before the pandemic. Our attention span was at about 47 seconds. And since 2019, 2020, we've gone through the most dramatic event in the last 100 years that has impacted everything that we do and how we behave with one another. For those of us, and this is why it's so important, I think, to tell people who are over 40 and over 50, over 60, you actually are baked for this moment because you grew up in a time when there was a longer attention span that was encouraged, where you were reading full actual books, where you had to learn to do things the hard way, where and it's not that life was easier or better. It's it's just that the skills that you need to develop your mind and to nurture your mind, I think Gen X and boomers, I think we were the last generation to fully, and older millennials were the last generations to fully experience that.
Yeah, I know. People look at me funny when I say I grew up before the internet. They're going, "What do you mean there was life before the internet?"
That's right.
But anyway, yeah, and
That's right.
we could have a separate podcast on this. I think maybe
Yes.
we should. So let me come back to. So you shared that losing your position at Performance Art, you experienced employment rejection like you never had before, right? 6 interviews, I
Yes.
think you said, for one job, and then radio silence. So how did that period sort of change your relationship with traditional employment?
My goodness. Okay, so there's two things. One was that it was actually not performance art. So I was working for another company that, and for a significant period of time in the healthcare field. I was the senior vice president for employee engagement. When the pandemic hit, this company, because they worked deeply in retirement and lifestyle, was very impacted. So they actually leaned out the company, and like they got rid of like the senior team, which I was a part of. And I thought I was going to go back, but as we all know, the pandemic, it sort of evolved and changed everything for all of us. So I had a coaching business on the side, right? And so I just started to build it up and I started to grow it. And then I was working for this other company, Performance Art. They had a different name prior when I first started working with them. And they were like, "Well, why don't you come in-house and work with our team, because we're trying to come out of this pandemic and we're growing into something new, and we'd love for you to be a part of it." And so that was like kind of a turning point. I made a decision that I don't quite regret it, but I still feel uncomfortable about it, which was I had a coaching business that was growing. I had a podcast that was growing, but because of fear, I said, "You know what? No, it's better to be with one company." And then it so happened that that company was absorbed into a larger holding company after a couple of years, so I was pushed back out. And then I thought, "Okay, I've got so much experience. I feel so great. I'm not worried about finding a job at all."
Right.
Hello. Hello. Oh my goodness. My goodness. How many resumes did I send out during that time? How many interviews actually, did I get? One company, I had like 5 interviews.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay, this is a done deal. We're good here." Didn't get the job. And that's when I decided, "Shay, listen, you couldn't get of um, a clearer sign that you need to invest in your business." And I was making, pretty good money with my coaching business. And I thought, "You know what? I got to get rid of this thing in my head that says you're not enough to have a business on your own."
Yeah.
And so I just I I accepted it. I I I called a couple of people who are what I would consider great thought leaders, and I asked them for advice for insurance, legal advice, business advice. They sort of became my team for building the incorporation, and then I just started calling people and saying, here, here are the things I have to offer. Are you interested? And I started to get work. And it became like all of a sudden I had a full-fledged business and I haven't looked back.
Yeah, so. Is that the moment you decided you were an entrepreneur and you sort of gave up the other corporate sort of
You know what? I decided I was an entrepreneur, I would say 10 years ago, but I didn't believe in
fear?
myself.
Right. Yeah.
To be honest, like if I'm really honest, I just felt like I have been so well trained to be an employee
Right. Yeah.
and to believe that safety is employment. You get your bank loans and your mortgage and what do they ask for? You have a job. And I was also, sort of at the height of my career. I was doing really well. I had kind of gotten to a level that I was excited about. But was it actually filling me up and giving me the juice that I wanted? I would say no. Like I would actually say, and I'm a prolific journaler, and I had kept some journals in 2019. One of the things that I had written was that spiritually I was feeling a bit lost and disconnected. And then it sort of got worse, and that I start to worry about that because one of the weird things about me is if you're having a conversation with me, you're gonna have a conversation about consciousness, you're gonna talk about meditation, we're gonna talk about the meaning of things. And what I realized was that I actually wasn't getting to do that part of the work. And as you get older, being yourself really matters.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I love about getting old is getting comfortable in your own skin. But I totally relate to that too because when I quit my job, and my parents have always been very supportive, even if they
Yes,
didn't understand what I was doing or why I was doing it. But they were the ones who were like, "Why are you giving up a good job and going off and doing, without a parachute, with into the unknown?"
yes,
So it's like we were imprinted to not go off that tried and tested path, which
yes.
we talked about is crumbled today. So I'm with you. And I think the hardest thing is sort of believing in yourself and the fact that there is no blueprint, but you still have the tools that you need to figure this out as you go, and you will need to figure it out as you go.
Isn't it weird that uh, we train people to actually not be dependent on themselves? You know, but get really well educated, get lots of experience, but still don't trust yourself. That didn't make sense. The other thing, just really personally, I've been a coach for 20 years. I started coaching people. I started with a CEO who actually came to my yoga class. And he said to me afterwards, he said, I'd like your help. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, I've got some difficulties dealing with people. And you took me through a breathing exercise just now that made me feel like normal. Can you could you can you teach me how to do that? And that's how I got into coaching. That probably was the first invitation to really go and build your own business. But I didn't listen to it. And I had to get really honest with myself in 2022 and say, you've been doing this for 20 years. You spend your days encouraging people to succeed, to believe in themselves. And yet you are questioning your own value. So I realized the shoemaker did not have shoes for herself.
Right.
And I decided I had to change my life and really give into building my podcast and build a coaching business. And so now here we are in 2025, a few months away from 2026. I'm not at all afraid, even though there's so many changes. I've benefited from those changes, and uh, I think so many more people are not only going to need to and have to, but they can, and they just don't know how.
Yeah, they don't. And also, I think they just need a little bit of a nudge sometimes, right? Whether that's from the universe or from somebody within the circle, or like the CEO who reached out to you. There are signs there, and it's funny because I've sort of been going through that too. A year and a half old business, and I
Yes.
often say, "Do as I say, don't do as I do." It's so
Yeah.
hard to do it for yourself. It's so much easier to do it with somebody else.
Well, and if you have a family, like I have 4 kids, and I have a husband, and we've got a life, and we've got bills to pay, and there's reality. Uh, but there's another piece, which is we are not transactional beings. We're human beings, and we are not a mind and a body. We are interconnected being, and so okay, so that's the wellness side, but the science of that is that we have hormones and chemicals in our body that are produced in our brain when we do certain things, and we act on certain and we act in certain ways. And when you are not doing work that you are great at, but you are doing it for money, if you love the money more than you love the work, then it'll work for you. If you don't function that way, if you need the work to mean something to you, to to do something for you, to generate that dopamine in you, then you have to find a way to do it. I think one of the most challenging things about this moment is that the internet is filled, and social media is filled with these conversations about the fact that there aren't going to be jobs, and that people aren't going to there's going to be mass layoffs. I think it was Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn who said, by 2034, most 9 to 5 jobs, or I think he gave a percentage, will not exist anymore. But why aren't we also saying the other side, which is being your own job,
Mhm.
being your own business? That's what will exist. And there's going to be other things that we create because of human ingenuity. So let's get into it. Let's not be afraid. Let's start making, creating, and building, and thinking and imagining. But most people have been so well trained to do their job that they actually have been trained out of using their imagination.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, we start out with massive, crazy imaginations as children, and then somehow the system sort of puts us into these boxes and these lanes, and we have to pick one, right? Yeah, and I think it's time to unbox again. You're right, and I think the opportunities are there. It's just getting the mindset there and letting people sort of realize that they can, and that's what I love about the solopreneur world, right? In the tribe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, most people are afraid to do sales. And sales is the hardest part, right?
They don't know how to do sales.
Don't know how to do sales, are afraid to do it.
Yeah.
Uh, and then the fact is you have like all these experts saying AI is going to do it for you. You don't have to, and you don't get your lead generation. You're going to get your lead generation through AI and all of that. At the end of the day, there's many of us that are still human. We want to have real relationships. We want to do business with people that we like, or that we're interested in, or that we're curious about. We and here's why the podcast medium is so useful, because it's not about being Joe Rogan, or whomever, the Midas touch, or whoever is the biggest deal right now. It's about actually building your community. And what podcasting does is that it allows you to share some of your thought leadership, your style, your abilities around how you connect to people, the things that you're thinking about, the people that you know. It allows you to build a community through that process. And that actually can become your first, uh, like your foundation for lead generation. And so I think a lot of people don't understand that. And you'll hear people say, oh my God, I tried podcasting. It's so labor intensive. It's so much work, but they're not actually also doing the sales and the relationship building piece. The podcast is only one part of it.
Yeah, no, very true. And I want to come back and touch on that and pick your brains about sort of specifically monetizing the podcast. But I want
Yes,
to touch on brand before we do that. So we'll come back to the
please.
podcast piece. So you've mentioned a few times now that you have this tremendous, awesome, I would say I'm in awe in terms of the breadth and depth of expertise that you've built over the years. But what's been the hardest part of translating that breadth and depth into a clear message that resonates with clients today? Because it can be a
Man,
difficult thing to
you've,
do, to distill that, right?
you've just hit it. You've just hit it. Well, it's a, it's a decision. And actually, it's so interesting that you're asking me because I have been, I was struggling and reluctant and to give up parts of myself in order to clarify the brand. And what's happened in the last three years in particular, just as we have a short attention span, there is also a lack of nuance in how we share business ideas and products and services. Excuse me. People require a lot of clarity. There isn't a lot of room for, sort of exploring and doing the salon and talking about things and, meditating on things, which are all the things I love. I love, love, love to do. Okay. And the reality is that impacts your brand for a number of reasons. It used to be that having a broad, sort of a broad awareness and knowledge and complexity was valued. Now, what a lot of business leaders need are people that can go in depth, go deep into one thing because that's the thing that they need the help on. And as soon as I really understood that my not that my business was being hurt because I could have continued the way I was because I've had so many strong relationships over the past, but it wasn't going to get me to where I want to go.
Yeah.
And it wasn't going to allow me to grow. So actually, over the next 8 weeks, everything is being refined. I've sold part of my business. I'm investing more in my podcast. I've got a new book coming out called Rebirth. It has a program that goes along with it. And I finally made the decision about 10 months ago that I needed to really drill down because we're not living in a world anymore where you can be that broad. Like if you're a celebrity, I think you can you there's more allowance for you. I have a perfume company, I have a clothing company, I have, makeup company, I am in movies, I teach meditation, I swim with the dolphins. A lot of celebrities and, high level CEOs, they might be able to do that. But I think for us smaller creators, I don't think that space exists anymore.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's also, I think, because part of it's also what the audience is looking for, right? I always tell clients I'm working with in terms of niching down, because there's always this fear that if I niche down, I'm leaving money on the table, and it's the other way
Yes.
around. But
Yes.
the way I explain it is if I've got a leak in the kitchen, I'm going to call a plumber, not a jack of all home fix-its. Now, that person may be brilliant and do a better job, but I'm looking at my problem for a very narrow lens, right? So I think that's, to your point, that's one of the things that when clients are looking for people like us, consultants, coaches,
Yes.
they're looking specifically for somebody who can solve their problem. Now, once you do that, I think you can open up the rest of the world, right? Because
Yes.
then you've earned their trust, and then the toolkit becomes more valuable to keep them long term.
Precisely. I think also what I was informed by in the last 10 months was what I was hearing from some of my clients that they were needing more depth, that they were going into places that they had never gone into before. And I remember a client saying to me, I had no idea that you did that. And that's when I realized, okay, I'm still spread too thin. And so I had, do you mind if I get a little bit like even more personal here? Like,
No, go ahead.
okay. So I had, at the beginning of the pandemic, gone through like a number of really traumatic things, job change. My mom passed away because of COVID. She died after like 22 days of COVID, and she was a very dynamic and health well person. She was a bit overweight, okay, and she was in her 80s. I know someone's listening going, well, but not well. She was living on her own. Like she was sending food for us, okay, during the pandemic. And she made a decision and went out somewhere, and I think that's where she got COVID. So it was very dramatic because we were very good friends. Um, and then I faced my own health process and experience. I call it a process because I was starting to go through perimenopause, and all these things were starting to happen to me. And they weren't the things that you read about. They were strange things. And I'm going to give you an example of one. So I've always been a fairly, um, how would I say it? I've been pretty confident most of my life about speaking and being able to get up on stage and go anywhere in the world and speak. And for the first time, I started to feel anxiety.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
started to actually have panic attacks. I never had this before. And I thought, what's going on? And then I started to gain a lot of weight, and I was having trouble sleeping. And so I said, oh, I see. I know what's happening. I think I'm entering perimenopause. I'm 54. So I think this was around 49. It started around 49. And so I knew what was happening, and I went and I talked to my doctor. She's like, not much you can do about it. It's just life. It's just unfortunately, it's what women go through. And that whole process, the grief, the weight gain, which really changes how people are perceiving you, how you perceive yourself, uh, anxiety, that was the piece, palpitations. It it made me really make some choices about how I wanted to live and how I wanted to care for myself. And so I, as I always do, I got into research. I started to study myself. I created a new pattern. I created a new process. I lost, and I'm not a thin person, but I'm not a big person. I gained 33 pounds. I lost those 33 pounds without
Wow.
going on a diet.
Wow.
And the reason I lost the weight and the reason I mention it is because it was about patterning. And when I lost the weight, the palpitations went away, some of the anxiety went away, and then the anxiety eventually disappeared. I required, at my age of being 50 at that time, I needed more rest. I couldn't accept that, but I had to. I needed more care for myself. I needed to eat differently. I needed to do work that really mattered to me.
Yeah.
And and then I started to share what I was learning and what was working for me with some of my clients. And I landed the most extraordinary client because of that work. She brought me into her company. And I started to coach other people within the company who were going through perimenopause. If you had told me in 2019 or 2018 that I would start coaching women and talking to CEOs and talking to men about perimenopause, I would have said, I don't think so. I didn't even actually no, and not to be like completely ridiculous. I don't even think I thought I was going to go through it. I thought, oh, I'm pretty healthy, like everything's going to be fine, blah blah. And then I discovered that perimenopause was this extraordinary transition that's neurological. And
Yeah.
it happens for like 5 to 10 years. And so it just it was a blessing, and it was just this extraordinary period of time that changed my career. Now, I was already a person who was willing to have a career changed. I
Right.
wasn't like, "Oh my God, what's wrong with me?" I thought, "Wow, like what could this be?" And then things were evolving in different ways. So that's I just so I think one of the things that as a solopreneur, it's a calling.
Yeah. True. And it comes from a very personal place, right? Now I always say
Yes.
the best businesses are born from a problem that you've experienced, because that
Yes.
brings an authenticity for your audience that you can't get from a book or from, academic study, which is still important, but having experienced it, you've been in their shoes. There's no
Precisely.
better, yeah,
It's
guide.
it's well, the issue is that we have a generation of women who are at the height of their careers often, who are not ready to retire or become smaller.
Yeah.
And but there are things happening to their bodies that might make them have to step out of their careers, or step out of the work that they love, or think that they'll never get to the work that they truly love. And what I like to encourage midlife careerists to think about, and professionals and solopreneurs to think about, is what what brings them ease in their life in terms of work, and then how do you apply that to customers and clients in terms of a service or a product. And that's where the sweet spot is. That's where the opportunity is for growth and profit. And we have to be unafraid to talk about profit. For me, it was the pandemic, perimenopause, and profit that changed my life.
Well, three
The
new
three
P's.
P's. The
Yeah.
three P's.
What was it? The old ones were package, price, and promotion, right? Yeah, I
Yeah.
love it. But that's interesting though, because I mean, actually, you're talking to women in midlife and who are experiencing perimenopause, and that's a very overlooked demographic, right?
Yes.
People don't talk about that problem at all.
No.
Um, and women are supposed to shrink away. Or they're supposed, like you said, it's like they're supposed to think smaller as they go through that. To your point, so what are some of the challenges you faced in trying to reach this audience, and where do you find them most receptive to your message?
There is no challenge in finding this audience. This
Okay,
audience is
yeah,
people are desperate
for a
for
voice.
information.
Yeah.
What I also do, because I'm not a doctor or a health practitioner, I'm a meditation teacher at the core, but I bring a cadre of different specialists together in the work that I do, and then I've also had different medical practitioners, uh, read some of the things that I've written about nutrition and the things that work for me. But what I encourage women and men, actually, because men have their own experience. They don't have the intense menopause, obviously, that women do, but men also go through quite a dramatic change in their hormones and their lives as they, go from late 30s and beyond. And because we also don't recognize very often that our aging is one of our greatest is one of our greatest innovations. That we've only been aging, like living past 100, for the last 150 years or so, right? So it's there what's baked into us is this idea that all human beings become diminished as they get older. Now we know that through nutrition and sleep and movement and weight training, weight tripping, weight training, and many other things, your spiritual sense of awareness of who you are, all those things contribute along with your financial well-being. And it makes no sense to me that after years of experience, that you should have less and you should be less because you are older.
Mm-hmm.
So I have found that the podcast has been useful in sharing that message, even though I don't always talk about perimenopause in all of my conversations. The podcast has been a great lead generator. I work with I have a sponsor. It's a company called Goji Wellness, Yoga and Wellness, which is a series of a suite of yoga studios, and they've been really great at putting me out there to meet their clients. I've found that reaching back out to old clients that I worked with before has been really helpful. Funny enough, TikTok has been a really great place for this 50 plus person. And I had to let go of some of the beliefs I had about how to sell and market myself. And as the next few months roll in, you'll see that I'm refining that even more because I've really decided to let go of a number of things.
Yeah, no, and you're right. It's sort of the tip of the sphere, right? And again, once you earn the trust, then you can bring the rest of the toolkit. There is value there, but it has to be sharp to initially get that door to open with somebody. So,
Yeah, and
mm,
that's why I've leaned in heavily to my podcast, which this year it was chosen as the number 6 midlife podcast in Canada, which was a huge uh, recognition for us, for this little podcast that I really started as just something to do during the pandemic and to connect with other thought leaders and share our lives together. I never imagined it becoming a profit center. What it has become is that, and I think it's important to talk about being intentional about your podcast doing that. If your desire is to have a media, like, celebrity podcast, that's a different beast. But if your desire is to have a podcast that builds leads, that allows you to have conversations that you would have if you were coaching
yeah,
or if you were consulting, which allows the person you're speaking to and the people listening to get a taste of your style, right? It's kind of a soft sell without really selling. And then if you are able to match that with a strategy of actually following up, and you have a CRM uh, structure within your business, then you're also going to another level, and you're starting to cultivate a community. And I think, like a lot of words in social media, or in this time, they get, these words are very confusing. We talk about community all the time, but what does it actually mean?
yeah,
For me, I want to encourage, inspire, teach, and train women and men about the most significant neurological, physiological change in their life that happens 10 years before they, become 50 or 60, or, whenever it kind of falls for you. And that will change the rest of your life. But
yeah,
nobody tells us. It's in that 10 years where there's cancers that are discovered. It is so life altering that I start to spit. Like, I can't even talk about it because I have worked with hundreds of people now, and I've worked with thousands of people over the last 15 years of teaching meditation and coaching. And I could tell you, 40 to 50, it is prime time for the destruction of your life. That's when people's parents die. That's when, your kids are growing up, or, going off to school. That's when your job may change. That's when there are divorces. That's when there are illnesses. That's when you're losing friends. It's really catastrophic. And what a lot of people don't understand is that they are having a physical experience that they're unaware that they could actually change or alter in some.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you're right. Depending on how you deal with that and sort of process that, it impacts how you come out the other side, also, right?
Right.
Incredibly.
Well,
Yeah.
and you come from the marketing and branding, like the advertising world, right?
Yeah.
Uh, if you think about the advertising world, do you see people in their 50s and their 60s, other than if they're the CEO, but do you see people in that age group being in that doing that work
You know,
anymore?
when I started in the industry, absolutely. There were so
Yes.
many of them, and we were, and they'd been there for 15, 20. It was a badge of honor to be at a company that long, right?
Yes.
But by the time I left the industry, no. I mean, there
No.
was, like you said, there were maybe like five people who had gray hair, and everyone else was like, 20
The
something or 30 something. Yeah.
and here's another thing about the hypocrisy of diversity, okay?
Yeah.
Like, we are so ageist.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This society is so, like, as soon as look a certain way or you hit a certain number, people are like, "No, don't put that on your resume. Don't say that you've been working for 20 years. Are you kidding me?"
Yeah, so many people told me to dye my goatee because it had too much white hair when I was
Yeah,
looking for a job.
I just think, so why do we have to deny who we are? And this is the other reason why so many people in midlife need to be solopreneurs,
Yeah,
because you could waste your time looking for a job, or you could decide, like looking for a job that you get rejected from, or you could decide what industries will really need me, where can I be of service. A fantastic thing to think about doing if you're finding, having a hard time finding a full-time position, is being a fractional CFO or fractional CEO or fractional CMO. There's so many startups or new, agencies and companies that don't want to have someone full time, or
yeah.
they can't afford someone full time, but they can afford you part time, or they can afford you as a consultant. And then if you have 3 or 4 of those roles, and because of AI and because of automation, there's so many things that you could do now that just didn't exist 5 years ago.
Very true. Very true. So I want to come back and touch on the podcast though, because we talked
Tell
about
me.
that specifically, right? So in terms of being a lead generator, so I want
Yes.
to explore two sides of that. So there's the human side in my mind and the tactical side. So how do you build trust so a listener or guest doesn't feel sold to? That to me, I guess, is the human side. And you sort of touched on it a little bit, but I want to dig in a little deeper. And then the second part is, then can we talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of how you actually drive revenue from the podcast?
Hmm. So again, it depends on the subject of your podcast. So if your podcast is a, a podcast about marketing and branding and and products, there's a natural evolution in the podcast where you you're going to invite the listeners to buy from you, or to go to your website, or to follow you to learn more, right? That's a more direct sell.
Yes.
For someone like myself who is coaching, you'll see a variety of coaches. Some coaches, the whole podcast is designed to sell. It's designed to take someone through a process and then say, if you'd like more of this, go to my website and you'll see that I have 3 packages, and maybe one of those packages are for you. If those packages don't work for you, maybe it's one-on-one and we can work together, and I'd love to work with you.
So they do a session, you're saying, to really show you how.
Yes.
Okay,
And you take someone through the process and you do the ask directly. We have to
right,
be unafraid of that.
sure.
Then you have people who are more like me, who are more subtle, because again, my podcast started as conversations with thinkers and people that I thought were interesting, and friends.
Hmm.
And it was not intended to be a lead generator. But because of when that podcast was created, it became a lead generator because a lot of people were listening to podcasts at that time.
Okay. Right.
That's what happened for me. And then what you then can do is decide if you have a product or service, and I have a number of services, I take my subscription list and I email the subscribers what I'm doing. And that has been a great way to sell services, products, and coaching. Another piece that is valuable. Oh, yes, I have to tell you about this, which is sometimes the people that you have on as your interviewees, they might be people that you can work with. They may want to work with you. This floored me. I was interviewing someone, and after the interview, we went on, and we only used an hour of the conversation. But after the interview, he said, "You know what, Shay? I'd love for you to come in and talk to our team about exactly what we've talked about here today." So then that showed me that I could be intentional about that. You might even say, like I say to some, I was speaking to someone today who's going to be on the show at the end of the week. And I said, I'd love for us to create a program together. I'd like, he's a trainer. And I said, I'd love for you to bring you in on the coaching program that I'm doing. And he was like, let's do it. So he said, I'll talk about what my program is, and let's like just riff on the podcast. And then that way people get a taste of what
Idea.
we're both bringing.
Right.
And then there's nothing wrong with saying, here's what we're doing together if you want to have more information. The follow-up is the CRM, looking at your subscribers, talking to them directly as long as they've given permission for you to do that. But what's so key about this, I've mentioned 4 different ways of going in. This becomes your community. And whether that community is 50 people or 1,000 people or 15,000 people, that's where the growth actually can happen.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But you are providing value, right? It's a question of which type of vehicle you use to deliver that value to people. So
It's you have to be clear about the value that you are bringing. You have to be truthful about the transformation that you're suggesting or offering, right? And again, not everybody is truthful about that. Some people are, they're really good at sales, but their content isn't great. I leave that to them and the creator, to talk to. We all, at the end of the day, have to think about our integrity and what we can live with. But I have found that the community has given me lots of feedback.
yeah,
People have reached out to me, have talked to me. And the reason for this is, if you think about it, we used to have like 3 television stations. I know this is a long time ago.
I
We
grew up
used
with
to
that.
have a TV guide that said, here, we used to have appointment television. And what was really valuable to the advertising world was that that's when you would have your commercials on, because you knew everybody was watching and we were all watching the same thing. Now we are, diffused into all sorts of ways. Everyone has a niche or a location, or they have a person they believe in. So the opportunity to become somebody that people trust is greater now than ever before. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people doing nefarious things who believe in conspiracy theories and promote misinformation and lies. Sadly, that is part of what we're living in as well. But there's this other piece that is very fruitful, is profitable. And I think what surprised me, because my deep desire was to be an employee again, was that there was opportunity in the cultivation of the community. And that's what has actually changed my mind, I think, about really drilling in to being an entrepreneur. I think also I used to be concerned about the growing of the business. And now I just decided, okay, well, I could partner with someone to help grow the business. So the producer of our show, Jim, he has a company called Music Box. He does a lot of that. And partnership is really important. Collaboration is really important.
Yeah, no, that's a really good tip, because you're right. We can't do it all on our own, and also we
No.
have different skill sets. So
Yes.
it helps to help each other propel our businesses together, right? So I
Yes.
totally buy that. So there was something very interesting you said to me also in our pre-call, that even the roughest podcasts had great content you could repurpose, right? So can you
Yes.
walk me through your content recycling system?
Oh my goodness. Okay, oh, so the first 6 months, it was some of the podcasts that I did were just very personal. So, there was a short bit that I did about my mom because I felt it was so devastated and she was so incredible. Uh, and so I talked about her. And then when I was a kid, I had an extraordinary experience. I had developed or contracted an illness while traveling called osteomyelitis, and it's a bone infection. And every time I say that, I touch my leg. I, and it's not funny at all, but I almost died. I almost lost the use of my right leg, my right knee. They were going to try to amputate my knee. It was a harrowing story. But along the way, a number of things happened that really saved my life. And one of them was that at Sick Kids Hospital in Canada, I'm in Canada, in Toronto, the physician on call was one of the leading orthopedic surgeons in North America. His name was Robert William Salter. And, 7 surgeries later, he saved my life. He taught me how to walk again. He was an incredible uh, physician and human being. He became a friend to my mom. My mom was a nurse. He just was. He was one of those people that believed in service and also believed that in the strength and the rejuvenation of the human body. So one day, to tell you a long story, I'm going to try to shorten it. So one day, I was telling this story about how remarkable this experience was. Like at one point, he we were waiting for what we used to call porters at the time to come and transport me down to have an X-ray, and nobody arrived. And this physician picked me up and carried me to the elevator and held me until we got to the X-ray machine in the basement, and then laid me down gently. This was my physician. Okay. So I told this story because I thought it was a game-changing experience and moment that changed our lives on the Canadian broadcasting channel called the CBC on the radio. Nikhil, on that day, Dr. Salter's children, 2 of his children in different provinces, listened to that show,
Wow.
unbeknownst to each other.
Wow. That's
Then they both reached out to the producers of the show and wrote me a letter separately, thanking me for telling that story about their father.
that's amazing. Yeah.
And so I interviewed them in the first year of the podcast because I wanted to reach back out to them. And it was, in the darkness of the pandemic, I just felt so much gratitude for being alive. And I just wanted to talk to people that I had something with.
Yeah.
And what I ended up discovering in one of those conversations was that the surgery and the process Dr. Salter used on me to help me walk again was something that he had just invented. I had never known that. I never knew that. And so I was able to take the content from those conversations and get this. This is going to freak you out. And I used it in a program for doctors and nurses about storytelling and the impact that they have on a patient. So that was, and you remember I said earlier that, did I say this? That I coach a lot of doctors and nurses.
Right.
That's how that work, that's where that work came from.
Wow. That's wild. Yeah.
So I've not gone into all of the content, but I've gotten I've done other things like that, or I've shared repurposed the content, made it into like sort of micro videos or micro audios. There's so much you can do. There's so much you can do. It depends on what your purpose is. And I think that we have to be willing to be fearless about what we are doing and understand that we've been conditioned to see work and to see the way we develop content, to the way we develop a brand in a very different way than the way things are evolving now.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any reason to keep hanging on to the way things used to be, because it means that we're not going to be able to work into the future. I think we have to be willing to see our jobs and the work and our experience, not like if you're doing neurosurgery or something, but to all other things. I think a lot of those things, to see it as content and ask ourselves, where can that content be the most useful? Can it be useful? Or where can my experience be put to purpose in the new job market, in the new world of creating? And if you look at a lot of the educational, a lot of the programs that are online, they're being taught by people who don't actually have a lot of experience sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's either good or bad, but why wouldn't you then do it? Like, why couldn't you, for example, with all of your experience in branding and being the brand doctor, you know, why couldn't you, maybe you already do, but, create your own series where you are educating and training and even just giving people language around how to move around in the industry, to mentor those coming up in the industry. Not and I think people get the word mentorship wrong. Some people say, well, Shay, like, everything's changing. I was in the industry 30 years ago. Some of my experience is not going to be useful to these newbies. Not true. Not necessarily true. What your experience is about is relationship building. It's about having conversations. It's about building a sales funnel. It is about how you evolve a story with a client. It's about how you negotiate conflict. It's how we could sit here, we could probably sit here for 2 hours with you and just make a list of all the things that you know how to do and have succeeded at. And then you say, well, are you telling me that nobody needs those skills? They
Yeah. No.
totally.
You're absolutely right. I mean, one of the things I always tell people is that, human nature hasn't changed in terms of the way we make connections, the way we emote, the way we build relationships, the way we form trust bonds. Technology comes, technology goes. There'll always be a new platform, a new tool, a new shiny object. But you're absolutely right. I love, those basic set of skills you still need, and they have to be
Absolutely.
taught. Yeah.
They have to be, I would say what they have to be, I wouldn't even use the word taught. They have to be experienced.
Experience, true. Yeah.
And it's the experience that builds the confidence and allows you to know this isn't just academic. This isn't a linear thing. You start here and you go there. The fact that we have younger generations that are struggling with performance, anxiety, uh, as
Social skills. Yeah.
a desire to even lead.
Yeah.
I think we're losing leaders because so many people think that leadership is an ugly thing. But 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 we are but the thing is their leadership, it hasn't evolved as yet. There's leadership work that the world requires of them. Every generation has skills that this world, that this earth, that the future needs. And this is why I also encourage middle-aged or midlife professionals to see themselves, if they're not already focused in one aisle, or in one sort of vertical, to see themselves as
Yeah.
a bridge between what was and what is to come. What has not changed are the types of human skills we need to be connected, to feel relationship, to be in relationship with one another, to have compassion, to have empathy. That's very important. Like in marketing, it's very important for when you're serving clients to understand what their needs are,
Yeah.
you know? And even
Absolutely.
when I use the example of Dr. Salter, listen, did that doctor have to pick me up and carry me down to the X-ray room in the basement of Sick Kids Hospital on University Street in Toronto? No, he could have just said, "Listen, I'm going to go make a call. We're going to wait for Victor or Jordan or Marianne or whoever to come and take you down." He understood that his work wasn't just in the OR, in the operating room.
Yeah.
It began in the relationship. That's where the healing began. That's where immediate trust.
Trust. Exactly. Yeah.
So I think that, and again, to get back to the podcasting, this is where a lot of us, Gen X renegades who are, feral, wild, we were sent out and we didn't have phones and didn't come home till late and lied to our parents about all sorts of things and did dangerous things. This moment, it is made for us. We can learn fast and apply it to the new world and move quickly. If something doesn't work, keep on trucking.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Hallelujah. Well said, Shay. So, on that question, now, let me ask you one thing about the future, and then we'll start to I want to get to my sort of signatures. So
Okay.
AI is changing everything, right? And
Yes,
you mentioned to me you're seeing it as an agent of ability rather than competition, and I agree
that's
with
right.
you. But how
Yes.
would you? Let me ask you how you first use AI in your business, and then what would you tell solopreneurs who are afraid they'll be replaced by it?
Golly. Well, you're only replaced if you think you're going to be replaced. You're not going to be replaced because you're constantly innovating.
Yeah.
AI is a tool. I understand that there's a lot of fear, and I don't know enough about it to say, well, is AI going to be are they going to be sentient beings? Are they going to be transplanting AI operating systems into the brains of humans? I don't know that. But as of right now, these are large operating systems that we can use to be assistants, to be tools, to be mediums of progress for our businesses. We have to decide which part of our business can be automated, and is it cold calling, is it some lead generation? God, I keep saying that because it actually works. um is it helping with writing? Is it helping with developing sales tools and sales plans? There's so many things that AI can do. Is it building websites for you? There's so many things it could do, and I think you have to be fearless about exploring and trying to make things happen. For solopreneurs, AI and multiple AI tools are useful because it means that you don't need 10 people to do the work. You can be the CEO and use AI and point it in different directions. The, the downside of that is that you're going to be exhausted because of the amount of information it produces, and that you have to decipher and try to understand whether or not it's useful or not. I think one also useful thing is that as you grow and you're able to have more income coming in, you could then maybe decide how you want to design your business, and then maybe have a developer that's fractional who works with AI under your direction to build some of the things that you want. This is the moment to do it, though, because we don't know what things are going to look like in 18 months.
No. And
And here's the other piece that's so valuable to think about here, is that many of us were trained to think about life in 5-year increments, and to think about life 20 years from now, and like what's going to happen in 10 years, and preparing for the next 5, etc. Does not exist.
right.
Does not. We don't know what things are going to look like by the end of this year. But what you can know is whether you are in the game or you're on the couch. And I've worked with a lot of human beings. When I was in healthcare, I worked with a lot of human beings between the age of 80 and 105. And I could tell you the distinct difference between the people who were very sick and the people who were vital and living their best lives. It wasn't, how people say, oh, they did everything on their bucket list. You know what? By the time a lot of people get to their bucket list, they can't even walk up that hill.
Right. Yeah.
It was the people who were active, who were changing their lives, who were making, changes in their 40s and their 50s and their 60s.
Curious. Yeah.
That's who, like, people who are curious, who are interested in life, who are like, they're at the gym. I worked with a woman, she's 99. She's lifting that 2-pound weight. She's lifting that 3-pound weight. She's fighting for her life.
Yeah.
We have to understand that we're also living in a time where there's a lot of nefarious actors. There's lots of people doing negative things, giving in misinformation, trying to sell us this bag of rocks of negativity.
Yeah.
Because they don't understand that the human being, like human existence, is so extraordinary, we don't even understand it. So as AI evolves, so are we. We're going to evolve. That's what we do.
Yeah, no, I agree. In fact, it's helped me multiply what I do by tenfold, right? The
Agreed.
key is figure out where it can help you be more efficient. Don't try and use it to replace you, to your point, because the human touch is still important. And I think that's going to become more
It's
valuable.
critical. It's
Yeah.
critical. It's you. AI is not going to raise your child. AI
No.
is not going to teach your child how to love, how to touch, how to feel, how to care for themselves.
Yeah. Or
This
hold
this
grandma's
is
hand. Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
still our work. And because what's happened, we are so we've been so dismissive. We've called these things soft skills. They're not soft, they're
No.
human.
Absolutely.
And being human is going to be more important in 2026 than it is now,
I'm with you.
especially as we go through, all of the tribulations of the most powerful people. Look at the most powerful people running the world. Have you ever seen so many disturbed people?
Yeah, I know. And that's true everywhere in the world, to be honest, right now. So, yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. It's this person. No, it's power.
Yeah. So, so if you could offer one piece of advice to somebody wanting to start their solopreneur journey, what would you tell them?
Uh, I would say have a very honest conversation with yourself about what you are good at and what is happening in the marketplace. And then ask how those two things can come together. Because you could be great at something, but if there's no one to sell it to or produce it for, you don't have a business. And you don't have to be, a brain scientist to understand that. But you can apply your abilities to 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 any environment as long as you're the one that's engaged. I met a fellow the other day who's a realtor, but he's a comedian. He's got so many clients because people just love to be around him because he's the funniest man in the world.
That's great. I love that. And no, you're right. And I had a guest on a few episodes ago, and she said you should do something that makes your heart sing and your cash register go ka-ching. And she
But
said both those conditions have to be true. It's not one or
they,
the other.
it is exactly. They go together, and we shouldn't pretend about it.
No, you're absolutely right. So, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners that we haven't covered, Shay?
No, I'm good. Are you
Okay.
going to ask me your quick fire questions?
We are going to the rapid fire then. Yeah.
I'm so scared.
Oh, you'll be great. If you could have a cup of coffee with any historical figure, who would it be and why?
Oh my goodness. Just one?
Just one.
Okay, it's going to be weird. The Hottentot Venus. Her name is Sarah Bartman. She was a South African woman in the 18th century or early 19th century. She was um, called the Hottentot Venus, and she was treated like a circus animal because of how she looked and her very voluminous buttocks. I would talk to her because I want to know how she survived for as long as she did. I think that some of the most extraordinary people in our history are the people who survived heinous things. We never celebrate them. We only celebrate the kings and the queens and the Vikings and, the warriors. And right now, we need a lot of survival skills right now.
I love that. Yeah, no, that's a great one. Complete this sentence. The best business advice I never took was.
The best business advice I never took, meaning it was good advice, but I didn't take it? Is that what
Yeah,
that
it was like it sounded like, or people believed it was great advice. Or maybe
choose a
that's a,
lane.
yeah,
Choose a lane.
yeah. I'm
I
with you
didn't
on that.
take it until like the last 15 months, and it's changed everything. But you
Well,
know
that's
what? I wasn't ready.
yeah, yeah. What's the last thing that made you laugh out loud?
Last thing. Oh my goodness. I think it was my dog, Finn, and I was kissing my husband on the cheek, and my dog got very jealous, and it wasn't about me, it was about him, and we busted out laughing. We just sent our 4th child off to university, so we have a dog. And we're laughing about a lot of things right now, so
That's funny. So you're empty nesters now. Um,
yeah, we're something like well, I don't believe in the empty nest theory. I think there's nothing empty, it's just vast, emotionally vast, what we've gone through with 4 kids, and, it's very exciting. I get to have my husband again, like, he's a very interesting guy. I get to spend time with him.
that's a great way to look at it. If you couldn't be an entrepreneur, what would you be doing instead?
Mm, not an entrepreneur because I'd be a chef.
Wow, that's amazing.
I love food, and I love cooking, and I think the thing about chefs is that they don't cook a lot of food. They cook little bits of food.
True. So you built a career around reinvention. What's a skill you'd love to learn or a hobby you'd like to pick up completely unrelated to your work?
I would like to learn how to draw. I'm very into cartoons, and I'd like to be able to hand draw.
I'm sure the next time we talk, you will be hand drawing. Well, that's a wonderful note rather, to end the show on, Shay. It's been so much fun talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and for all the wisdom that you shared with us today.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for your time. I love that you reached out, and I hope this is the beginning of more growth and more opportunity for you and for both of us. I want to wish you continued success.
Thank you, Shay. Here's what really stayed with me from Che's story and how I think you can apply it to your solo journey this week. You don't need permission to become what you already are. Che was coaching before she ever called herself a coach. She was leading before she ever held the title. And that's true for a lot of you too. You're already doing the work, but you haven't claimed the identity. And that's where so many solopreneurs get stuck, waiting for external validation before they act like a real business. But the market doesn't respond to hesitation. It responds to conviction, not ego, but clarity and confidence. If you're already solving problems people are willing to pay for, you're already in business. Time to make it official and own it. Second, recognize when the traditional path is rejecting you for the wrong reasons. When Che couldn't land a corporate role despite decades of experience, it wasn't a reflection of her value. It was the market telling her she'd outgrown employee status. If you're over 40 and facing rejection after rejection, consider this. You're not being passed over because you're not good enough. You're being passed over because you're too experienced, too expensive, or, let's be honest, too threatening to younger, less secure managers. That's not a problem to fix. It's a signal to pivot. Third, clarity is not just a branding exercise. It's a business decision. Che said something that hits home for a lot of middle-aged solopreneurs. She was reluctant to give up parts of herself to clarify her brand. That's the internal tension so many experts feel. You've done a lot, you've helped in 100 different ways, and that history feels sacred. But in today's distracted world, your brand has to tell people quickly and clearly what you do and why it matters to them. Simplifying doesn't mean shrinking. It means choosing strategically and deciding what you want to be known for. And if you're resisting that decision, chances are you're not just holding on to an identity that served your past. You're confusing clients who are supposed to fund your future. 4, your personal turning points are professional opportunities. Che didn't set out to make perimenopause a business pillar, but when she got real about her experience, it unlocked a new audience, a new client base, and a message that actually mattered. This is a huge lesson for solopreneurs. The challenges you're tempted to hide, your struggles with age discrimination, health issues, professional fears, or career setbacks, might actually be the experience that build the deepest connection and credibility with the right clients. Because we don't trust people who are always winning. We trust people who've been through something hard and still choose to build. That's the story people buy into. That's the story that sells. Finally, your podcast isn't a product. It's a community builder and lead engine. Che reminded us that podcasting isn't about followers. It's about follow-up. Her business grew not because she was chasing metrics, but because she was using the podcast to start conversations, build partnerships, and showcase her value in action. If you're treating your content like a megaphone instead of a mirror, you're missing the point. The right content doesn't just tell people what you do, it makes them feel like they've already experienced working with you. If you do only one thing this week, make it this. Take one experience that shaped your life, but you've never shared in your business, and find a way to make it visible. That story might be the bridge someone else needs to believe they can hire you. Thanks for listening to Unfiltered Solopreneur. If you're listening and realizing your brand feels scattered or you're struggling to package your experience so clients instantly get it, let's fix that. I'm offering a limited number of free 30-minute brand clarity sessions to help you spot what's missing and define your next move. Book it at clarity.boostsolo.com or through the link in the show notes. Until next time, keep breaking free from the corporate grind, and remember, your story is your most powerful asset. Live solo or die corporate.